Hello and welcome to the Anyone Can Play Guitar podcast,
which gives you, the listener, a series of hints and pointers on your journey as a musical artist.
providing you with interviews from those in the music industry, along with our own experiences.
Ben and James shine some light on the many pitfalls and opportunities that being a musician has to offer.
Last week we caught up with singer-songwriter Willie Mason, where we discussed intimate venues, songwriting, recording and building relationships. This week we start a one-off three-part special with guitarist, band leader and session musician Jamie McCredie. We kick off this trilogy by discussing how he learnt the guitar, covering self-study versus formal education. Welcome to episode 24 with me, James, and him,
Ben. So, James, set the scene.
I will set the scene. So, in the very near future, I shall be getting married, which also means I will be out and about for a few weeks. Therefore, we are having a special one-off, not to make a habit of this, 3-part episode.
In brackets, you never know, another one might come. So it might not be a one-off.
Caveat. But in general,
yes.
We're not planning to do any others of this. This is just a one-off specific as we needed. So they'll still be scheduled one a week.
Yeah.
They'll still come out as per what you've all been used to. However, we need to get a few set up, ready to go and out there.
Yeah.
And, well, the other reason as to why is because Jamie McCredie,
I was going to say it. Yeah.
who is our guest for this 3-parter, was absolutely more than generous with his time. And
Yes.
we had a load of great stuff that we talked to him about.
Those noodles were getting cold and that beer was getting flat.
Well, not only did the man have a bit of a cold and a cough, he also had his tea waiting for him, getting cold, but still was so enthusiastic about talking to us about it. The conversation just kept going, and we could have edited it down, but there was just a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, and it's a different angle on things. So, Jamie is a musician.
A very talented musician.
Yeah, he's a professional musician. Not that the other ones aren't professional, but he's like, it's not a band situation.
Yeah.
There is a bit of that, which we're talking about. He's getting into like his own band.
Yeah, he's starting up, doing music for himself, as he describes it. But he's also but not just a session musician.
No,
which is
far from it. Yeah,
which is sort of a part of what he does.
I would
but
say
also
it like pays the bills part, isn't it?
Potentially, but the whole band leader role, which was something completely new to me. When you said it was, I've got Jamie, he's a great guy, he's a band leader. I was like, so what now?
What now? Yeah. So my wife knows Jamie from school, and now she always mentions Jamie about what he's doing. I'm like, this is made up. This is too cool. This is like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm going on to a Roisin Murphy, or I'm like, this is made up. Like, there's too much going on here. But I'm joking. But
yeah, but
like,
then
this is why is a triple header, because there's just layers upon layers of all the things Jamie does.
There's a lot of very interesting things. I'm a big fan of these episodes.
Yeah. So the first one, before we get into it, is all about how Jamie learnt his craft more than anything, and we talk a little bit about self-learn versus formal learning.
Yeah.
A lot about.
Yeah, the difference between picking a book up or going onto YouTube or whatever versus actually formally studying. And we go into a lot of detail on...
A lot of detail.
Yeah.
A lot of detail about a lot of detail. But yeah, it sounds like, 3 episodes. It's for people who are just starting out, this is a good trilogy.
Ooh. Trilogy. Don't say it like that, because I don't want to do more than that. I don't think we should. I think we should keep them to 1 or 2 parters.
Okay,
but
let's get into the first part, and we'll catch up at the end.
Right, Jamie, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on.
It's a pleasure to be invited. Thanks very much, lads. It's brilliant.
No, thank you. Much appreciated. So, I guess before we really dive into all the different things that we want to spend time speaking to you about, Could you just maybe give our listeners a bit of a background in who you are, what you do today, but also sort of your history, how you got into music, what you've done over the years that's got you to sort of where you are today, and just generally a bit of a background on yourself?
Yeah, well, I'll do my best. I'm not sort of the world's most confident orator when it comes to talking about myself. But I'll give it a shot. We'll see how we get on. Well, my name is Jamie McCredie, and I'm a professional guitarist. And I suppose you could kind of split what I do down the middle into two categories. On one hand, I'm a session musician, and I've gone through all of the various methods of studying music, and I went to university and did a master's in studying composition for orchestra, and then I did another master's down in London at the Guildhall School of Music in jazz performance and writing for big bands, and just learning how that kind of music works. That was all kind of to prepare me for the thing that I find particularly fascinating, which is getting a chance to play guitar in lots of different ways for lots of different people. And I'm fortunately sort of touch wood at the moment, very lucky that a lot seems to be going quite well at the minute. And I do seem to find myself in situations where, 15 years ago, I might have sort of pinched myself and thought, well, imagine if you could end up there kind of thing. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
That's kind of one half of my life. And the other half is you can't always just play guitar for other people all the time. So there's this stuff that I do for myself, which unfortunately always takes the back burner because you always have to pay the bills and you've always got to go where the big tour is or where the next record date is or something like that. But I do play guitar and compose and write music for myself, which I play with a band, which is just gradually starting to build nice momentum these days, and spending years to try and find out the way you want to represent yourself as a musician. That takes a long time. And I don't know, I feel quite happy these days that I think I know a lot about how music works, and now I can start thinking about how to say something, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So what's your band called then?
Well, it's not a band. It's just an absolute egomaniac trip. It's just my own name.
Oh, okay, okay.
So I've written all the music, and I'm lucky to play with some absolutely killing musicians who I'm happy to say are good friends of mine now. There's some guys who play on Strictly Come Dancing and play with Sting and Manu Katché and, I don't know, Mika Paris or Kylie Minogue, guys who are doing similar sort of things to me, but that I really admire. And fortunately, I've asked them if they would like to play my music, and for some reason they've said yep. So it's great. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's sort of rock and roll, but with lots more chords than you'd imagine. So it's not quite jazzy. It's not quite just rocky. It's somewhere down the middle with a definite lean on, I don't know, the compositional side of things and a lot of improvisation.
Right.
But hopefully not losing the balls to the wallishness that you need from rock and roll, I think.
Good.
Just learning to talk about what I do for a living.
Cool.
So
yeah.
You've mentioned there, Jamie, that you've sort of formally studied music in a number of different forms. So a lot of people who are listening will love playing the guitar and will sort of learn themselves, whether it be off YouTube or off a friend or get lessons or whatever. What prompted you to think, you know what, I want to actually do some formal study in music? What drew you to that path?
Well, I guess to kind of answer that question, you've got to take a step back kind of towards my teenage years, which is, I used to play cello and I was terrible. I was a little short kid and I had to carry my cello on the school bus over my head to get on the school bus, and that's not very cool. And by the way, I'm not very cool now either, but that's fine. Anyway, so I was frustrated with that, but I don't know, I always just felt like, without maybe even being so at that point, I felt like music was something I understood. You could put a record on, and although back in those days I couldn't tell you what was going on, I kind of understood what was going on, if you know what I mean. I didn't have any of the knowledge or the vocabulary or the ability to tell you what was happening, but I could certainly hear it. Felt like I understood it. Now, I probably didn't understand it, but I just had this feeling that I might be able to, So then my frustrations with the cello came to a head when I kind of found my dad's guitar in the back room of our house. I'm from Newcastle, like you guys, as I'm sure you know. And my dad was cool. He had this really amazing blue Encore guitar, not an expensive thing at all, but I just remember looking at it and thinking, wow, that has to be the coolest thing in the world. And for a little sort of short, dorky kid, it just became something that I became completely obsessed with, literally overnight. And whereas I felt like I understood how music worked but didn't understand how to manipulate it on the cello, as soon as I became interested in the guitar, there was just something about the way that it is assembled and how, I don't know, how the strings are tuned and how it fits in your hand, that suddenly I felt like I knew how that worked as well. So I could probably grab one thread of feeling like I understood music a little bit, and then feeling how I could understand how the interface of this cool instrument works, and maybe sort of tie those two strings together in the middle. So, like lots of teenagers, I was obsessed with it, because, you know, the guitar gives you a real focal point in your life when perhaps you need one.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And then it got to the point where I thought, this is clear that this is what I want to do and I have to do. And I just felt like there was no longer any choice by that point. You know,
yeah, no choice there.
Yeah, this happened when I was about 12, and this is a common thing. A lot of musicians that I knock about with in various bands and down in London, it's this sort of obsession which becomes not a conscious thing. It sort of just overtakes you. A lot of guys that I know say the same sort of thing. So I got to the age of about 17 or 18, something like that, and I felt pretty frustrated with my musical education. The school I was at was well-meaning, but I don't really think they had any of the resources to help me figure out what I was trying to do. And especially as maybe that music department was a bit of a classical department, if we can say that way. Mm-hmm. And I was a guy who couldn't read music and did play a classical instrument. I was just this sort of dorky, long-haired teenager who was like obsessed with music and could probably play whatever you put on the CD player in front of me, but I couldn't tell you what it was.
Right.
Yeah.
So by that kind of level, I realised that you could put something on a CD and I could play it back to you, but all I was doing was copying. And that's cool. You have to go through that process. But it dawned on me that I can't play any music that's put in front of me, and I can't tell anybody else how to play anything using the correct terminology. And that happened at around about 17, 18. So I started looking to try and find answers, you know. Now, back then, my problem is that I was quite talented in terms of what I could play, and I entered a few guitar competitions. I remember entering one for BBC Guitarist of the Year on the radio, and I won that, which kind of made me think, oh, well, maybe you are, you know, quite canny. So I applied to, I made inquiries as to what I could do with that. And then all of the places like the Royal Academy, like Guildhall at the time, like Trinity College of Music, they all said, well, you can play, but you don't have any of the skills in place that you'd need in order to get to the next stage of your career if you want to become a professional, which is, you know, I can't read and I can't tell you what chord I'm playing over. I can just listen to something and go, cool, you know? So it was like I don't know, just a raw enthusiasm and maybe a technical ability, and probably nothing more than that at this stage. But I was obsessed, so nothing was going to stop me. So I took a year out of school. By this point, I'd already decided this is what's going to happen, so I really didn't care too much about A-levels and GCSEs and stuff, which is retrospectively, you know, that might have been a bit daft, but I was just playing guitar all the time. So I took a year out of school, and I just read every single music theory book I could find. I taught myself how to read music, and then I applied to university and got in, and some good teachers took me under their wing and maybe saw that I was very interested and very keen and could potentially be quite capable with the right influence, if you see what I mean. So so that was pretty much it, really, just an obsession and a realization that you can only, or I could only get somewhere by trying to figure out what it is that I can't do and then work on that instead of doing what a lot of guitarists do, which is find something they can do and keep doing that. You know, you've got to keep looking for the thing that makes you uncomfortable and that makes you think you can't do it. And if you feel really awkward in it, that it's not working, then you know you're onto something. So I feel like I recognised that quite early on.
Yeah, I know what you mean by that, because when we played in the band, I used to like, because I was the guitarist in our band, I used to like trying to work out how pop songs were played. So, for example, like how you could play a dance tune, i.e. like a Faithless tune, on the guitar.
Yeah, nice.
I kind of got obsessed with that sort of stuff as well. I quite like that whole trying to do something a bit different. And you're right, you do get a bit obsessed with it, trying to figure out how you play Insomnia, for example,
exactly.
on an acoustic guitar and just see how it sounds.
And because if you have a creative mind, it's like that plus maths for people that don't like maths, you know what I mean? Because there's going to be a solution, you just got to find it. But because it's creative, it allows you to try and find some way to make something that wasn't there before. And I've always found that just completely addictive. And you know, then you disappear down the rabbit hole, but it's usually a happy one if you keep your eyes open.
Yeah, definitely. and I think what you mentioned there, Jamie, in terms of, you know, a school not necessarily offering, in terms of a music course, class, department, not being exactly what you were looking for. I think that's going to be a common thing that a lot of people will be able to relate to. And you mentioned the cello. I remember I spent about a year of my life with the violin. And it is not too dissimilar, other than maybe it was a little bit smaller for me to lug around. It was very similar to the experience that you've just said. And I guess but my experience potentially put me off. Wanting to pick up an instrument for a while until...
You were good at football as well, though, weren't you? So
well, and that was a bit of a distraction, whereas as opposed to if I'd got into it more then, it wasn't until you picked up a guitar that I got interested. And it was interesting, Jamie, when you were saying that it was that... I liked the bit when you were saying you were looking at where you could go with this skill that you felt that you had, and there was almost a set of criteria that, whether it was the universities or whatever, that we're looking for, which meant, oh well, that's something that I'm going to need to get to the next stage. So I'm wondering, in terms of, you were saying you read a lot of books and things yourself, what did the actual studying in a sort of structured way at an established sort of educational centre give you that you think continuing down the self-teaching path wouldn't have given you?
That's a good question, James.
I mean, to prepare my answer, that's quite a challenging one. I think what it does is it helps you find some sort of realism in what otherwise might be a little bit of an ethereal thing. Because for me, for a long time, it wasn't, you know, I mean, it's very easy as a 35-year-old to look backwards and say, oh, I had a game plan, I knew exactly what I was doing. But it didn't. You know, you only develop that when you start to realise what's required. And for a long time, I just sort of fannied about and had a really good time. You know what I mean? So I would put on records, and I was completely obsessed with everything by Rage Against the Machine, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Steve Vai, Guns N' Roses, all of that sort of stuff. And I used to sit there like an idiot, and I used to say to myself, you can't leave the room until you've figured out the next 8 bars of music. Or even at that time, I probably couldn't tell you what 8 bars of music it was. I would probably say 15 seconds worth of stuff. You know?
That bit.
You sit on the floor cross-legged and say, you're not going until you've figured it out. So that helped. But what the slightly more academic thing did for me is it allowed me to play music that I'd never heard, which is a total revelation. Because, I mean, one of the things that I find so exciting in life as a musician is that you get to turn up to do a session or whatever it may be, and you, more often than not, you might play some music that you're not going to get a chance to rehearse. You just have to go and do it. And I find that thrilling. And that's allowed me to a little bit of access to that world, you know, because I realised fairly soon on, maybe I was about 18, 19, that if you can't read music as a guitarist, and you want to do what I wanted to do, which was end up in lots of different positions rather than just sort of hope for the best in a band, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Which actually, sorry, to very quickly digress, you are faced with that position quite early on. You can either sort of chance your luck and see if you can make it in a band, which can, if you're lucky enough, bring back incredible rewards, and that would be wonderful. But that's very, very high risk.
Yeah.
Because the likelihood is statistically that that's probably not going to happen. Certainly not at the time when I was knocking about in Newcastle.
So how much of that was a conscious sort of thought process for you at the time? As in, here's one path which is high risk, here's another which isn't.
I don't want to sound like a bit of a smart pants, but I remember making that decision, or at least entertaining it and exploring it when I was 19 or 20. So, I don't think I was a total knacker at that age. So I think that was a conscious one. One thing that really influenced that is that I knew by then already that most guitarists can't read. Because most guitarists get excited by the sound of the music and the immediacy that the guitar allows to allow you to get quite good results on it quite quickly. So what I kind of realized at that point was, you will do yourself a favor if you can be one of the few guys who can read,
Yeah.
And I'm very, very happy that I tried to do that. That was at around the time that I took a year out, and I said to myself, well, teach yourself how to read music this year. And I've always had a bit of an obsessive streak with my personality, so I just focused on that and did probably 4 or 5 hours of trying to figure that out every day, and figuring out where stuff is on the guitar. Because I'm sure with the other discussions you've had and with the people you've spoken about, it's probably come up in the past that the guitar's a real... Am I allowed to swear? I don't know.
Yeah, if you want to, yeah.
Well, the guitar's an absolute bastard to learn to sight read on, because it has 6 strings, and every 5 frets you can play the same note on one string that you can on the next. So you end up with 5 middle Cs, or perhaps 6 if your guitar has 24 frets. And it's unlike the piano, where when you learn to read and you want to find where middle C is, it's right there, boink, in the middle of it, in front of your nose.
Yeah.
But on the guitar, it could be anywhere from a foot to your left to a foot to your right. And if you choose the wrong point to play to make that decision, then the next note, you might now find yourself in a position where you can't get to the next note. So the guitar takes a long time to learn to read on, especially when you're talking about chords. But just because I was a bit of a dork and I really loved it, I put a lot of effort into that. And that's really helped me since I moved to London. I came down here, and there are some musicians who are just incredible musicians. And there are all around the world. I've met some wonderful musicians. But a lot of players haven't got that one thing in place. And it really does help, because it's such a thrill to play some music with some other musicians that you've never met. It's totally exciting. And then you can hear the music appear in front of you, and you're just listening to something that you've never heard before, but you're taking part in. And then you kind of revel in the ability of the other people that you're playing with. And you kind of look up and you catch someone's eye and you think, oh, this is amazing. Listen to this. This didn't exist a minute ago, or at least I was aware of it. And I know I found that quite an addictive thing, and I'm grateful I did, because I've stumbled on so many things up to this point, and I just feel grateful that I've stumbled upon them. I've kind of recognised what they are once I've stumbled on them, but it certainly wasn't being a smart aleck and knowing what I was going for originally, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. But making the most of those opportunities when they come along.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so I guess back to the almost to the original conversation question before we went off track, which was really useful though, by the way. So it was back to that, and the reason why I asked the question in the first case is because I know a lot of listeners who pick up, whether it's the guitar or any other instrument, will go onto YouTube or they'll speak to a friend or whatever, and they will try and self-learn, because there's a lot of material out there to do that, which is obviously one perfectly valid, way of going about it. But I guess what would be useful to hear from yourself, Jamie, is what the additional benefits are of supplementing that self-learning ethos that you clearly had with that sort of structured learning as well.
Yeah. Okay. again, it's a difficult question to answer because I think all of these things depend on what you put in is what you get out. But I think the most beneficial thing is that as a young student of music, you don't know what you don't know. You know, you know what you do know, and even then, maybe you don't. So the structured learning thing, which, as I say, I only sort of discovered quite late on. You know, I'd been playing guitar since I was 12, and then I was 19 or 20. And it was at that point I started to get lessons when I did my first degree. And I found it a revelation because you had access to people who knew how it works. And they had experience and they had knowledge to tell you, you know, what the pitfalls are or what to look out for and how to be disciplined. And very importantly, actually, what records to listen to. Because, you know, all of the sight reading stuff and all of that business I've just been mentioning, that is still just a tiny thing. The thing which is most important is that you listen to as much music as you can and pay attention to it. Because I don't know if you know, but there's a guy in the Northeast, two actually. There's two guitarists in the Northeast who are really almost single-handedly responsible for the musical education to that kind of level in the North. And their names are James Burkett and Rod Sinclair. And they're very, very good players and also very good educators. And sorry about the cold. And they told me what to listen to, and they explained to me. Both of them said it independently. They said the answers to all of your musical questions are in your CD collection, and that's really profound.
Yeah.
But as a 19-year-old, I'm not even sure that I really recognised that then. It's only as you get a little bit older and you start saying, well, why don't I sound like I'm playing country music, or why don't I sound like a proper jazz musician, that the penny clicks. That what you have to do is go and put these records on, and you have to copy everything and absorb it so that you understand how it works. And in doing so, you can forget all of the educational stuff. You can forget all of the, you know, learning your minor seventh chords and learning your Dorian scales that go over them and all of your natural sickers and all that sort of stuff. If you just listen to records really intently, you can usually piece together all the information that you need to sound like you're playing correctly with an awareness of the history of music, you know, and that's a big deal. So I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, because I think the answer is sort of twofold in that it helped me enormously because it showed me what I didn't know.
Yeah, no,
but it also made me think latterly, which would be a bit of advice that I would give anyone, that really what you need to do is just be super duper proactive and put records on that you adore, and also put records on you don't like, and just figure out how it works and try and learn how the chords work. And then it all sort of kind of falls into place a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
No, I think. No, I'm not sure whether I answered your question.
It did. You did. I think that made a lot of sense in terms of the not knowing what you don't know.
Okay, so hopefully that beer wasn't too flat. I suppose it's just the first part, isn't it? This is just the first part, so by the end of the third one, maybe we'll talk about the flat beer.
Yeah, it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
I'm sure he's had another one since then as well.
I'm sure.
Yeah, but first things first, like very enthusiastic about, like a bit like a chilled out Paul Langley. Very enthusiastic with a lot of great content, but just chatting about it. Not I'm saying Paul's not chilled out, but you know what I mean. So I was the guitarist in our band, as you know, James. But Jamie and I had two different paths to the guitar and how we used the guitar. And that's probably why he's still a working musician and I'm not.
Well,
there is that.
You partnered with us jokers. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was quite interesting that he picked up the guitar and obsessed over the guitar, as did I. He learned all the books, all the theory, all the guitar manuals, all the chord books, all the tab books, and just absorbed everything. And got into teaching as well.
Yeah.
And we spoke about how that was kind of where it was heading.
Yeah.
And then we're getting a bit more about that in the next episode, but just that whole bit.
Yeah, it was interesting to see him describe a lot of similarities with yourself that you could relate to, and then a lot of differences.
Oh, yeah.
So you both had a love of the Chili Peppers and would pick up that book and just completely, as you've both sort of said, obsess over it until you could play something that sounded similar to it.
Yeah.
And And I think that's come through in a few episodes now, and it totally makes sense that if you're going to learn, I think you said it, like when you bought something out of a guitar magazine and this week's tablature was something that you didn't really like or you weren't interested in, then you might try because you bought the magazine, but
you've committed to it.
Yeah, as opposed to something that you truly love and you're going to have the music on in the background, press pause, right, try and play that bit. That's not quite right. Play that section again. There's just far more intrinsic motivation to do this and do it well if you're doing... I think that goes with anything. If you're doing something you love, then you give it a lot more, typically.
Totally. And I totally understand what Jamie was saying about getting this thing. Was it his dad's guitar, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Picking it up, so in my case it was Michael's. Going, right, how does this work? And then as soon as you get a note or a chord or learn a riff, it's like, right, what's next?
Yeah.
And I can see why Jamie obsessed over it. Now, I didn't go as much into it as Jamie did, and I probably wish I did, because he went right down the technical route of what the scales and how things work and what goes next, and like learning, like as in going to play stuff that he's just heard. I can rarely do that. I've done it a couple of times.
Well, I'm still impressed by anyone that can do that, to just have something playing, listen to it and go, right, I'm now going to play that myself. Like, what? No.
Yeah.
But the way he described going about doing that...
Makes sense.
I was like, right, yeah. But he gives... What I liked about the episodes with Jamie, he'd sort of give some very clear, logical but simple steps to say, here's how I would approach doing that. And I was like, oh, right, no, I'd still maybe struggle a bit doing it, but I'd almost have a path to at least trying and giving it a go.
Definitely. And I think for people who are in bands and stuff going, well, we're not going to go down this route of like being session musicians or like band leaders, but it's the same principle of obsessing over a song you're trying to learn or a song you're trying to write, or a kind of feel you want to get. Right, so I want to sound like the Chili Peppers. I'm going to learn all of Californication. That was the one, I think, exactly what we spoke about. And it's obsessing all over it, because then that'll make you, well, obviously make you inspired, but it'll get you playing in a certain way to pull that energy out of you, so to speak. And it's the same principle, just for different reasons.
Well, there was another bit, maybe he's jumping around a bit here, but there was another bit that when he started to describe why he moved from that self-learning approach into the more academic focused, like structured learning almost, that sort of described it as, one of the benefits that he got out of that it allowed him to play music that he'd never heard before.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now, I think that for me was something that I'd never really thought about the benefits of that. So, for example, we're saying there that, you know, play the stuff that you love because you'll get that intrinsic motivation and you'll do it, and that totally makes sense. But to your point there, you'd get really good at playing a particular type of music. But if you're an indie guitar band and you've only ever learned indie guitar songs, then guess what? Chances are when you start to write your own stuff, you're going to sound like an indie guitar band. Now, that might be
horror,
fine.
Yeah.
But if Jamie or others have then learned classical jazz, or they've learned whatever other genre, then their palette is going to be
there's that palette again,
far wider.
And that is really useful, because if you've got, let's say you are an indie guitar band and you struggle on a bridge, you think, well, I know this song by this artist who's like a flamenco type feel to it, or a jazz feel to it.
Yeah.
What if I just pinch a couple of their chords? It's not going to sound like it, but it's the feel of it. And all of a sudden you've got a bridge and it's a hook as well. It might, because it sounds a little bit different. That little bit of colour from your palette that you don't normally use.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting way of looking at it. And it's, again, I've mentioned this a lot of times, of just thinking about it, what you want to get out of it. Now, I was slightly different to Jamie, that I picked it up and went, I just want to learn all these hits. That's what I want to do. And it's just scattered on like guitar books, and then, right, I picked up this one, an Oasis chord book, right, I learned Wonderwall. Try, some might say, didn't get it first time, don't like the song anyway, let's move on. Well, I know fine well Jamie would have went, no, I'm going to learn it just because I can.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing. That's a great thing to have. There's nothing wrong with what I did, because we still formed a band and we still played songs.
Not at all.
But Jamie seems to absorb the guitar playing and theory much better than I ever did.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that if there's someone listening going, well, that's what I do, Ben, I do the same thing as you, but it's not right and it's not wrong.
But again, when we're saying, like, we've mentioned in a few episodes now, going all in on something and really committing to something. Like, he took a year out to just learn. I think he said he just read every book that he possibly could find.
That is all
when he was in the self-learning bit. Like, that is commitment.
It totally is.
And that's not like, I might give it a try. I'm doing a bit in my spare time. I really want to do that. That's like, damn, I'm in here. But for him at 19 to be thinking, right, that there's more chance of me progressing and achieving the goals that I want to achieve if I'm not in a band, because percentage-wise, looking at the amount of people who make it in a band versus the chances of me making it, whether it was as a session musician or whatever, I'm going to pick that route because it's more likely to yield success than that one. That's quite a decision-making process to go through as a 19-year-old.
And this is quite tricky, because there's a lot of things we're going to listen to in the next couple of episodes that I kind of like want to jump to, but it'll be out of context.
Yes, hang fire.
Hang fire, there's plenty more to come.
The other bit, so we've started to talk about the learning himself, which he did a lot of. But then again, when he moved into that formal, structured learning, it's an obvious thing, but one of the things that he talked about is that he suddenly had access to a lot of people who just knew how things worked. They had experience, they had knowledge. So there's a lot today that you can go on YouTube and just learn stuff, Not like, Jamie would have to save up and buy some books or whatever.
Probably then,
if they were cheap second hand, it might not have been that much of a cost. But today, you go on the internet and there's a lot of ways of self-teaching yourself for free, and there's a lot of great content out there.
Yeah.
What you don't have necessarily is that ability to ask questions. I mean, you can. Again, there's certain ways, groups, forums, etc. But that someone who's put a proper structured plan together to say, look, here's a set of things that you really ought to pay attention to. Here's where to find this out. It's almost back to the curation bit. So if Mark Radcliffe's talking about creating a radio show and the whole curation process of taking all the music in the world and putting it into one package for you, you've got people who take all that learning in the world and sort of condense it into, right, here's what you actually want to spend. So you don't spend a lot of your time looking at YouTube videos and going, that's not really what I wanted. Next one. That's still not really what I wanted.
And you might have spent an hour
before you spend quite some time going through a lot of the garbage to find the good. Whereas you go to the structure, whether it's university or whether it's something else, that people have spent the time pulling the good stuff and then teach you it. So that makes sense.
And I am still impressed anyone who can read music. I've never been able to read music. So the fact that, because I follow on socials with him, and he showed a picture of something he was learning for a stage show, and I was like, that might as well be in a different, well, it is in a different language, but means I know those notes. I know what sound a G makes, but that does not look like what I'm supposed to. Like, that is what hard work and graft looks like, and that's why.
Well, it'll take a while. I started to very briefly when I sort of like, right, the piano, quite like to know how that all works, and sort of got to the point of, right, that's what a C looks like, right? But then I never followed it through. I would then be like,
discipline, isn't it?
Because it was one of those where, and discipline is the word. So I'd start on that, and then I'd be going abroad. So I'm like, right, I'm off to Germany, right? I want to brush up on my German, so I'd start learning a bit of that, and then it falls by the wayside. It's just having that specific, dedicated focus to say, this is my goal, this is what I want to do. And
yeah, I totally agree, because, as I said, the dedication part of it, I was the opposite a little bit. Well, yeah, I was the opposite, because if I couldn't learn it, I'm like, oh, I just don't want to learn it anymore. I want to learn a different thing. Well, Jamie will be like, I've mentioned this already. I'm going to learn it to prove I can learn it.
Yeah.
Because one day I might be playing with that artist who does that song, and now I know their song.
Yeah, well, I mean, he even said, didn't he? He was like, he would set himself little mini targets, like, right, I'm not going to leave the room until I've figured out the next 8 bars of music. Even though, like, at the time, he was like, well, I wouldn't even know what a bar of music is, so it would be, I'm not going to leave the room until I've learnt the next 20 seconds of this song, and I can play it back to myself. And that's a great way of breaking down. So his big goal would be learn the whole album. So you break that down, right, I'm going to learn this song. Then you break that song down, I'm going to learn this 20 seconds. Yeah. It might break down, I'm just going to learn that few seconds to get from that bit to the next bit. Yeah. And you just completely repeat it. And you know,
well, that's what Ross was talking about the few heads, wasn't it? That's complete militant discipline.
Yeah, well, it's just breaking things down into manageable chunks to help yourself learn, and it sounds like that's part of the approach Jamie took.
And I know, like, we talk a lot about bands and stuff, and people getting in bands or being artists. This is just it's a different world in the music industry. That is something to consider, because
Jamie's constantly in a band.
He's still,
like, you know what I mean?
It's like in a lot of bands, and it always sounds like what I mentioned at the start. Like when he's posting stuff on Facebook, I'm going to do this next or that next. I'm like, it's like an ever-changing cool job.
Yeah.
Because I bet you there's bands who've been together for years who can't stand the sight of each other. And like, oh well, I'm going on tour with Roisin for like a couple of months, then I'll be on tour with this other person, then I'm working with Tokyo Maya's on something, and then I'm at the Book of Mormon.
Constantly fresh.
Yeah, and like I know it's a little bit different than what we normally talk about, but if you're a talented guitarist or harpist or singer or whatever, definitely something to think about and go, you know what? This is actually really interesting, and this person is making a living in London, which is not cheap, doing something he loves. Yeah. And well,
can't grumble at that.
Can't grumble at that. And that all came from a lot of hard work, but it's not hard work when it's like, well, you're playing for a living.
Yeah, it's hard work, but it's enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly.
Hard work, and that's the difference. Yeah,
exactly. So it's credit to him.
Yeah, I think to finish off, one of the quotes that I liked in this episode was, "The thing that's most important is that you listen to as much music as you can and pay attention to it." Because I think there's a difference.
There is a massive difference.
Just listening and actually paying attention. Again, not a bad bit of homework, though, is it? Listening to as much music as you can.
Well, do you remember when we were at school and our music teacher said, I just want you to listen to one bit of classical music each week? Now, that wasn't a very broad palette of him to say that, because it should have been anything, really, just to but really listen to the music.
I don't know, I still listen to quite a bit of classical music today. Like, if I'm in the car, which is reasonably rare for me, but if I am, then if I put the radio on, I'll tend to put classical FM on or something. Like the general radio output just doesn't generally interest us that much in terms of radio that you can pick up in a car that doesn't have digital radio or whatever. And I still enjoy quite a lot of it. And
me too.
I probably wouldn't have got into that had
not for Mr. Beckett.
Well, potentially not.
Yeah, but it's the same type of thing of just listening to it, because someone has done all this on purpose.
Yeah.
And
typically a classical music piece, there's a hell of a lot of thought gone into the composition of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Up next week we have part 2 with Jamie. Here we discuss how to go about replicating things that you hear on a guitar, moving to a big city to chase your dreams, and being professional.
We've reached the end of this week's episode of Anyone Can Play Guitar podcast.
Big thank you for tuning in, and remember to stop by iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.
While you're there, it would be amazing if you could leave a rating and a review.
All the show notes can be found at www.acpgmusic.com
And if you want to get in touch,
email us your questions, any feedback and any suggestions to info@acpgmusic.com.
That's it for now. Keep supporting upcoming artists.
And we'll catch you next time.